or join us. I don't want you to have to see this 20 years from now. You might as well see it live.
Are we ready?
Why?
Yes, we are.
Okay. The importance of this interview is to preserve the history of Israel and Bathsheba family for future generations. All the questions that will be asked by myself and by those around us, of course, are meant to develop a mosaic of the first couple of decades of life of our family here in America. We just heard Abe Fishman tell us about the experiences in Russia before they came here, with a little follow-up on what went on here. So now we're going to move along to the next phase, which will be the first in the 1920s and the 1930s, and certainly interspersed in there will be later years as well. Sam, let's begin with you, and would you give us the first things that you remember? And by the way, I would like for this interview, for the three people sitting here, to kind of focus on your life connected with the rest of the family, your interaction, your family's interaction with the family as a whole. So let's talk first to you, Sam, about the first remembrances that you have.
From the time I was born?
From your very first remembrances. What is the first thing that you remember?
Well, I remember that we talked about the farm up in Ellenville, which is actually Ulster Heights was the area up there, which is about 6 miles from Ellenville, up the hills. And I remember that, well, I remember when I started school there, the one-room schoolhouse. That was 1918. I remember they were talking about the First World War, which was finishing up at that time. And I remember when my brother Ben was born, right after that.
And was he born on the farm? He was born there?
I had started school already.
Mm-hmm. And what was the school like? I mean, how many?
It was a one-room schoolhouse with all the grades from 1 to 8. First to 8th grade. And they used to have
One teacher.
one room. One room, yes. And they used to have little groups. They'd have, by the teacher's desk, they had a bench, and they'd call up children in one class, say, to quiz them about their homework and arithmetic or reading. Each time she'd take a different group, starting from the 1st grade up to the 8th grade.
Was there anyone else from the family, any other children from the family in that room with you?
Pardon? I don't.
Was there anybody in the family that was in that room?
In the class? No, not at that time.
Rebecca wasn't there.
It was afterward that when Abe and all the others came to this country after the First World War. And then they started in that same school with the same teacher, Miss Sherman. Yes, I remember that name all right.
All right, let's move on now to Brooklyn.
Well, no, before that, there were 3 families that had that farm up there.
Okay.
Was Sam Fishman and Max and Ida Waprinski and my parents, Joe and Rebecca Parker. But then they got my father and mother got another farm that was a few miles away. They went on their own. And with the farm came a car, a Ford car, too.
Why did they do that? Why did they go out on their own?
Huh?
Why did they go out on their own?
That was, I don't know, but maybe 1920, something like that.
Why did they do that?
Huh?
Why did they do that?
Why did they go out?
Why did
They separate from.
Why did they separate
well,
from?
the 3 families just was too much for one farm.
All right, now we're getting to
So
the...
they went on their own.
Okay, let's move down to Brooklyn now. Let's-
First
Well, after that, they went down to
You were on the
Ellenville.
farm
Very
too.
important event. I got
Okay.
born on
Okay,
that farm.
all right.
Don't leave that out.
Wasn't there,
How old were you?
wasn't there a horse and buggy? The doctor came in a horse and buggy to deliver you?
You also have to tell them about the electricity that your dad helped put
Oh,
through,
yes.
which was
Okay.
important.
At that time, the farms didn't have electricity or telephone. My father was, well, everything was new then, actually. And my father was involved with the other farmers to get the string wires, electric wires up to all the farms, and also telephone wires. So that's the first time that they had electricity and telephones. Oh, yes. There were various things. Then we moved down to Ellenville. We got, my father opened up well, my father and mother, and I was even working in it. Green goods, fruits and vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
Fruits and vegetables. That's how we got started. And we had a house down in Ellenville. We lived on Canal Street, I remember that.
How many years are we talking about? A span of how many
Not
years?
too many years. Everything happened very, very quickly. And after that, we moved to Brooklyn. That's when the Fishmans moved to Brooklyn too.
Okay, Ben, let's get your remembrances of on the farm.
Well, I was born on the farm, and I think we moved when I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Yes.
That's about when we left the farm. We went to Brooklyn.
Oh, yes.
Now, wasn't Ben Waprinski at the time, wasn't he there? How does that come in?
He was living with his parents, Max and I, Waprinski.
And he was born there too. on the farm.
Was he born on the farm?
I don't quite remember that, but he was a little older than, yeah. He was the younger Ben.
Yeah.
Ben Parker was the younger Ben.
Yes, we had it distinguished. My name was Buzzy at that time.
Update the tree.
You had to tell the difference between the two Bens.
Okay.
What kind of a farm was it? How did they make a living? What were they doing?
Well,
They
that was
had
on
boarding. My mother used to prepare the meals, food,
What, up on the, I mean, at the other farm.
at the other.
Oh,
But
yes,
did they
had
grow
boarders
stuff,
there.
or was it
Of
more
course, only in the
animals?
summertime. The season-
Actually, that pretty much was covered on with Abe talking about the harvesting the apples and
But
things
that
like
was
that.
after they left, because they came about.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying to move it along
Yes, I
into
know.
Brooklyn
Wow.
at this point,
Yes.
and to get those early years in Brooklyn, which I think maybe we can even relate to even more than
Well,
the farm
after-
years.
After that, we moved to Brooklyn. For what? We actually lived, for a short while, we lived with the Fishmans.
That's when she was.
But tell us
Yes.
about that,
Yes.
because I don't think we knew that. Tell us about that. Do you remember
We
where,
moved there for a short while she was born.
Yeah.
do you remember where that was, what street that was on?
Snedeker
Okay.
Avenue.
No,
Snedeker.
we moved
Sackman.
after moved to Connecticut, but they lived on
That's correct.
Hegman Avenue,
Yes.
which was perpendicular to Williams Avenue.
But there were 5 of their children, plus now there would have been 5 of you. How big a place did,
Just for a short while she
Yeah.
was in the hospital with her, that we stayed there, then we went to our own.
Yes.
We went to Snedeker Avenue after
That's
that.
right, near, what is it, New Blake?
Yeah.
Right near Blake, oh, yes.
so Ben, what is your first remembrances?
Well, I said I was born in Ellenville. At 5 years, or there were 4 to 5 years, we were still up in Ellenville. Then we moved down here, and at that point, we were right next to a Torah, what do you call it,
Jewish
a
school,
Jewish school.
yes.
And instead of being put into the first grade in a regular school, I was put in there, so that I studied my Hebrew during the day and my English at night. That lasted for less than a term, and they decided that that was not the right thing, and I was taken out of there and put into a regular public school. So I was already a half a year behind.
So that brings a question to my mind. What language did you speak when you were on the farm, Sam?
What language? What you mean in the house?
Yeah.
We spoke Yiddish, I
Yiddish.
guess.
Yiddish,
Yeah,
we spoke
Yiddish.
Yiddish.
Okay.
But at school, I spoke English.
Did you? Rose,
Well,
what,
his guy studying Hebrew probably had to do with the grandparents coming, and they
Yes,
wanted
my-
you to.
My grandfather was the first one to try to teach me. I think I learned 2 letters. That was all.
But he
Israel?
taught him Hebrew. Didn't you study with the grandpa?
Well, but he actually went to Hebrew school after.
Well,
I
he
think so.
influenced the grandparents,
I
I
think
think.
I went maybe to that same school that you were
all
going.
right, Rose, give your first remembrances now.
Well, when I remember, we lived on Williams Avenue. We had first lived on a 4-family building across the street,
Yes.
and then we moved to the apartment building that you all, those of you of that generation know, 591. And we lived on the
Top floor,
top floor,
the 4th floor.
and Anna and Abe moved across the street.
Yeah.
They
Well,
were
Yes.
590.
That's correct.
It was while we were at the other school that Uncle Abe arrived. And he came in, and that's when he became my father's partner in business.
Actually, 591 Williams Avenue was really the hub of our family for many, many years. And thinking about it as preparing for this interview, I realized that either in 591 or very close to it, on the same block, and for us too, on the next block and across the street, there were Golda's children, Uncle Morris's children, Fanny, my mother's children, and Abe's family. Of the 5 children, 4 of the children represented lived in or around 591 Williams Avenue. That was really
Within a
the
very
hub.
short distance of it.
Between Newport and Williams.
Williams.
No,
No,
Newport and
The train,
No.
train,
Because
because we lived there.
Riverdale. Is that the cross street?
Riverdale.
We went-
Parallel to
Yeah.
Newport.
We went beyond that because we and Gussie lived beyond that. We lived just on the street leading to the train.
Newport Avenue,
Oh,
Newport.
near
Yeah.
near the
Yeah,
theater.
right,
Yes,
right,
okay.
right. So we have, picture this, we have this big tenement building with the lobby that was, really for the time, it was magnificent. When you looked up at the ceiling, it was the scene of a sky with stars and I think there was a moon and sun. It was, from my perspective, it was really a very, very special place. And so much went on there, so much went on. Let's talk to begin with about Uncle Abe and Uncle Joe. They went into business together.
Yes.
So let's talk about that for a minute, and then I want to go to the social aspect of what that building and what that area meant to our family. So Sam, tell us, and Ben, because you were involved with the business too.
Well, my father had started this business and had built it up.
Would you explain what the business
The
is?
business was a wholesale fruit and produce. And he was actually, total time he was in it was 30 years, but he had started with it with a horse and wagon, and then went to a truck,
So we would pick up the fruits and vegetables and then deliver them to the,
to restaurants, hotel, and luncheonettes or whatever it was. And then when Uncle Abe came over, he was immediately made a partner.
and what year was that?
Well,
In
we
22.
were still, we had not moved into 591 yet. We were at the other apartment when he came over.
Okay.
And on the same street.
He didn't even speak English well then.
574, I don't remember.
I remember the number.
No, because 591 was being built. We were the first tenants in 591,
That's correct.
see? And we were at the top floor.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, what else would we be? But
No,
up at
because
top.
later on, we moved down.
Right.
Later on, we moved down to the first floor.
And Ann and Abe moved up to the, not the next.
The third floor.
When I say top floor, there was no elevator. You had to walk up 4 flights of stairs each
No,
time.
no, 3.
3 flights, 3 flights.
There was nothing over there.
Yes. Those were the years we were able to do it with very little effort.
Right,
We're
right.
talking about our
Okay.
parents, too.
Yes.
Let's think for a minute, and let's talk for a minute about that apartment, because I have to tell you people that as I was doing this morning, I had so much feeling about this place. There was so much stuff that went on in that apartment, And I think, downstairs, in the downstairs apartment. And I think that the way you people lived with your parents there was very typical, I think, of many educated families in, you know, in that era, and in that family. And what I'm referring to particularly is that when I give a talk on the books that I have written, and there was a time when people used to daven on different farms at that time in South Haven in the early years, that 1920s. And I always say, most families had, what did they have where they could put the Torah in? From what I talk about, it was always the Jewish family, always picture intelligent Jewish families with an encyclopedia in an enclosed bookcase with the glass doors. And that's what you had. That's one of the things that I always so admired. Where did they get that encyclopedia?
They bought it for him.
I know,
It
was
was
it,
his high school, his elementary school graduation present.
that's
He
what
was
I,
going into high school, but it was a china closet that we used for the encyclopedia.
They also had the
Intended
Book
as a
of Knowledge.
Was the Britannica?
They had
The
the Book of
encyclopedia.
Knowledge.
We started with the Book of Knowledge.
It started with the Book
Oh,
of
that
Knowledge.
was maybe the
Then
only,
we graduated to the Britannica.
the 32 volume one,
yeah, yeah. Okay,
13th edition.
can you tell me, one of the things that was very unique about Joe Podger as he sat at the dining room table working on books? There was something that Joe Podger always did,
Drink tea.
drink tea.
Drink
Tell
tea.
us, how-
Oh, yes.
tell us how he prepared the tea.
He didn't prepare it, my mother prepared it.
Okay, you're right.
You know, when I came in the family, it
He
wasn't,
did it
he did
too.
himself, yes.
No, because normally we were not allowed into the kitchen. We were never allowed
That
into the
comes here
kitchen.
too.
Man,
We were not allowed into the kitchen for any reason.
How did he prepare the tea?
But they had a samovar, didn't they?
No.
They had a little teapot that they steeped the tea
Right. He would put loose tea in that little teapot
all day long. They
all
kept
all
going.
day long, and then he would go to the kitchen and pour that sense. He made sense, absolutely, because my daughter just bought me one of those,
But
and I'm
I
carrying
don't
on
think you're
Joe's
correct in saying
tradition.
that he went to the kitchen.
He did.
Yes, he
think
did.
I remember.
I remember
think
him
she
going to
brought
the
it for him.
China,
Yes.
to
Well,
the
maybe
China.
that too, but I remember.
All right, let's move on, let's move on to dinner in the Podger household. Today, a lot of us have center aisles in our kitchen, and we run in and we quick grab dinner, or we sit around the kitchen table real fast. We have to eat fast because the kids have to play hockey, and we have to go here and we have to go there. What was dinner like in the Podger, and where did you eat?
In the dining
Dining
room.
room.
In the dining room. I say we weren't allowed in the kitchen.
Well,
But that's,
Okay.
that's why we moved down from the upper level downstairs, because it had a dining room. At least we converted it to a dining room. Nobody else had a dining room at that time. They used it, the family before, as a bedroom. But it joined the living room, and we had a dining room, and everything took place in the dining room table.
Well, tell us what everything is. Give us some examples of what.
Well, one end, my father would be doing his books, at the other end, I'd be doing my homework, or the men would come and play pinochle. At one end, your father and your father, no, not your father, yes, your father came and played pinochle too.
Who?
And,
Who? Whose father, who was it?
Egg Fisher.
yes, and, I'm trying to think what else we did, and anyone who came to visit, it was always in the dining room.
Now, what about serving dinner?
You mean the sequence?
No.
Oh.
The-
Oh, my
Okay.
mother serving dinner to everybody and then she eating in the kitchen?
Right.
Yes,
Right,
she always
right.
would do that. She was very, I don't know whether you put it
Self-effacing.
subservient that way,
No,
that she would
no,
do
she
it.
said her kitchen was her domain.
Yes.
But she
Even-
didn't eat
even
with us
you-
in the dining room
Even you
often.
weren't allowed until a little later on. But we were never allowed.
I have to tell you
Became
one
old
thing,
enough.
when we lived up on the upper level,
Boiled chicken.
and we were going to take piano lessons, and my father got us our own piano, Ben and I. But we couldn't, there were 3 flights of stairs, and they weren't gonna move it up the 3 flights of stairs. So they had to take a window out on one of the It must have been the living room windows, but that, and they
They
and
hoisted.
and they hoisted it up, and all the children on the block came to see the piano being hoisted up and into the apartment. It was really an occasion for everyone.
Rose, tell us about Sunday morning reading the newspaper. Do you remember how and where you read the Sunday morning newspaper?
Probably on the dining room table, I don't know.
No.
And tell me, I don't remember.
You read the newspaper upstairs in Aunt Anna's apartment.
Oh, no, I went every afternoon to read the comic strips in the
Okay.
Daily News because we didn't get that there. I had to read about Dick Tracy. Oh, the other thing that we used to do on the dining room table was play backgammon, which we made with shirt cardboard. And Sam, and I don't remember if you played too, but Sam and I remember playing that. And we played backgammon.
How come you didn't play backgammon
I
with
don't
Ben?
know why we didn't.
Well, he was,
I was always left out.
You didn't want to lose.
I was in the
He
middle, I
got
was
no
left out.
respect.
You're the middle child.
And Ben, do you remember that on a Sunday evening, when the men were playing cards, do you remember what my brother Irving and I and my mother did? And your mother? We sat in that little living room off the dining room where I picture it as a rather dark room with heavy drapes and tapestry, a beautiful tapestry along the wall, and we would sit there while Ben played the piano for us, entertained us on the piano. And I don't remember, Rose, whether you played, I think there were times when you played duets with him.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
remember you singing
We
also,
started
Rose.
together. I was
Yeah.
tw-
I started first, and
You
then
started.
when you started, then you got the piano. When I started, I had to go play in somebody's
get in
house.
on anything.
I know I was 12 years old when I started. That's all I
Well, I
remember.
was 6 1/2 when I started.
You were that young at one time?
Separate corners.
Yeah.
There's 4 years between us, so. 6 and a half.
4 1/2 years.
All right, let's back up for a minute, and Sam, why don't you talk about your children? You know, how many, name your children.
And then we'll test you to name
And
your
you know what,
grandchildren.
even name your parents, as they did on Abe's. Name your parents and then name your children and your grandchildren,
And great-grandchildren.
and great-grandchildren.
My parents were Joe, Rebecca, Podger, and who else you want?
Well, your wife and your,
Oh, Charlotte, of course.
Incidentally.
wait a minute, wait a minute.
She helped me get my children.
The other way around,
She was a great help.
Tell us what year you met Charlotte, because you got married right after that, so
We got married in,
You
I was in
served.
the Army, September 1944. I remember that very well. September 3rd,
Yeah.
1944.
By the way, get on the record, I was not invited to the
There he
wedding.
goes again.
Paris.
I was in Paris.
We didn't want to take you away from Paris. I mean, I didn't get a chance to get to Paris.
Oh, yeah, how did you meet? How did the two of you meet?
One of the fellas, I went to school there, and the Army sent me to what they call it.
ASD.
Officers training.
Yes,
Officers training.
and there was a
No,
whole group of us.
ASD, Army Special
Many
Training.
Jewish guys too were there, by the way, in the school, that is, the students. And this one fellow was always bringing other fellows to Charlotte's house. And then one time he asked me if I want to meet a nice girl who was doing a medical technologist, who was doing medical work. And another fellow by the name of Stan. The two of us went over there. And we had, I guess we must have had a dinner or something. We didn't go just for nothing, you know. Anyway, and afterward, I asked him, Sam, are you interested in, he says, no, he's got many good girls. He's interested in the other kind. So that's when I started calling her. And eventually I wore her down.
And how soon after you met were you married?
Well, first of all, I took her to Chicago
Yes.
meet my relatives in Chicago. I mean, just to
And
show
we
her
approved,
off.
immediately we approved.
Some interpret it as getting their approval.
Exactly.
No,
He said it's the right way.
of course, just I went to show her. And after that, we were married.
So how many months?
We
Uh,
met
with the-
June the 30th, then we were married September
The
3rd.
same
A
year?
little over 2 months.
When was the courtship?
And someone said it would not last.
Oh, we don't know yet, it's only,
I know it sounds like 16 years.
you know, it's just a good start. 60 years.
Tell us about your children.
Well, we had Yale and Marvin. And of course, eventually, we lost Marvin. Yale, well, she went to college, well, to high school and to college. And Marvin also went, and let's see, then he ended up in Rochester University of Rochester.
Is it loud enough?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, eventually he got a PhD in medical statistics. And, they both ended up working at NIH.
And what about the grandchildren now?
Named their spouse?
Perhaps give the spouses.
Named their spouse?
Give their
Oh, the
spouses.
spouse, yeah, right.
What?
Marvin
Oh, there's
married.
this- Yes, we have 2 great in-laws, I mean, or whatever you call it. A great son-in-law and a great daughter-in-law.
Gross.
Well, just give me a chance now. Everybody's coaching me. Lou's Grossman and Debbie, her name now is Debbie Podger, used to be Debbie Goldscharter. And grandchildren, let's see now, let me get it straight. Let's see.
Charlotte, why don't you help?
Jeffrey Grossman and Robin Grossman, who are now both married and have children of their own. And what's the name? Melinda and David Parker from my son's side. And let's see, I have to get this straight. Jeffrey's married to Jennifer, and they have 2 children now, Hannah and Max. They have those names, rather common names in the Jewish family. And Robin is married to Glenn Firestone, and they have 3 children. Let me see now, Nicole, and you have to help me, Sean.
Brandon
Brandon.
and Jessica.
And Jessica.
Who
So
may
that's,
still come to them.
huh?
Okay, Ben, let's go on to you
Yes,
now.
yes.
Tell us about Yetta.
All right. I met Yetta about 1947 or 46, between 46 and 48, because I met her, I came out of the Army in 1946 and got married in 48. Sometime between that time I met her, and
Me, she went to school with me.
she was a friend of hers. And we got started. I was supposed to teach her how to ride a bicycle, which I never did.
It was just an excuse, huh?
And we got married, and we moved to Empire Boulevard in Brooklyn, and that's where we spent 8 years, and then we moved out on the island. As far as the children, Joel and Ellen, and what else?
Grandchild.
Grandchild.
You have Rebecca.
Rebecca, okay.
And Rebecca's is buying at Nordstrom, doing a little
She's
personal
now- she's
shopping,
now
Buying and selling.
employed by Nordstrom, okay.
aspiring to be a buyer.
Right, that's what she has studied for.
Okay, Rose, you want to pick it up there with your family?
Okay, you all know I was married to Julius Rom, and we had Joanna and Ronnie, and Joanne is married to Steve Goldberg, and she's Joanne Rom, just for the record. And their children are Joshua Goldberg and Allison Goldberg, And Ronnie is married to Don Frank. Ronnie Rom is married to Don Frank. And the children are Rebecca Rom Frank and Arcadia Rom Frank. And I'll let them tell you what they do. I never remember their level of achievement on that. They each have a master program, but beyond that.
Rose, how did you meet Julie?
Nice to meet Julie.
And
Julie lived in the Bronx and I lived in Brooklyn. He was at one end of the line, I was at the other end of the line, but we met in Manhattan, neutral territory, where many Bronx fellas would never go to meet Brooklyn girls. That was a no-no.
Why?
But we met. and
Why was it a no-no?
Huh?
Why was it a no-no?
Because of the traveling. They didn't have cars then. They had to go on the subway. So there were many subway rides that he did on Saturday night all the way back to the Bronx. And I guess we were married about a year later after we had met. And our first date was a bicycle ride that we took around Brooklyn, just there of Rosh Hashanah, where we were going to go to Aunt Anna for dinner. And what else?
Okay, our interviewees are very interesting people, and I'd like to move on now to your retirement. And I'd like you to speak about what you have done and what you are currently doing in your retirement years. So Sam, again, let's begin with you.
What my work was?
Your,
Yeah, first.
let's start with the work, right? Yeah, with your work history.
Well, I was working before right after I got out of college. I was working for the city of New York and the state of New York. And then when I got into the Army, eventually to go into school, they sent me up to Los Alamos, where the atomic bomb was developed. And then after that, after when I was getting ready to what they call it, from the Army, getting out of the Army, they wanted me to remain up there, to work as a civilian, but I said, no, that was just too far from New York. So I went, and I went down, let's see, what did I do after that?
You came back to Brooklyn.
I came back to Brooklyn.
Because you
yes.
left somebody there.
And then, let's see, then eventually, well, not too long after that, I got a job in Oak Ridge.
Tennessee.
Yeah, with the NEPA project, which was going to develop a nuclear-powered airplane, because at that time they were working on the nuclear-powered submarine, which was a big thing. Well, anyway, but eventually after that, I got a job with the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington here.
As a nuclear physicist.
As a physicist all along, yes. And that's where I worked for, about 24 years, and I retired.
I want to interject before you go on to retirement. I remember two things. One was when I was very young, and whenever I would come to Tante Becky, to your house, I would say, so Sam, what kind of work do you do? And he says, I have a good job. He says, I sit and I look out the window and I tell them whether it's raining or not. So that was the one thing I remember. And the second thing I remember...
You didn't know you were having your leg pulled?
No, I believed him. And the second thing was, when my brother was in California, he was getting ready to be shipped to the Pacific. And you were at our house for holiday that time. And my mother was so upset, and you said to her, Fanny, I can't tell you why, but you don't have to worry about Irving. And that was right after that the atomic bomb was dropped. I remember that. I remember that.
No, couldn't tell anybody.
I know, but that's what you told her. You said, Fanny, you don't have to worry about Irving. And then they shipped him to Europe, to Ben. And he shared.
Yes, we met in Paris.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, he came to Paris. I don't know where he was stationed, but he came to Paris twice.
Well, of course, anybody who's anybody came to Paris.
So tell us what you did in retirement and what you're now doing in retirement.
He retired.
Well, but together you have done things together in retirement.
Well, we go to all kinds of programs. Once we moved to Montgomery County, we started with the JCC, Jewish Community Center, and all kinds of things there. Especially Charlotte got into political stuff. She got into where they do go to the legislature, Annapolis, and they have speakers come to talk. Both political speakers and all kinds of other speakers come to talk every week there. And I was involved there too. In fact, I took a mosaic class. I did mosaics. You know what?
Which were exhibited.
Huh?
Yes, it was.
Well, at the Ring House, yeah, where we live now. Well, they'll exhibit anything here.
Okay, Ben, tell us what your work history is and your retirement.
All
That
right.
should take about a half
Before
hour.
I went into the Army, I was in the wholesale, I went into the wholesale produce business. That was, at the time, I was about 17 or 18. The Army took me in, so I turned over my business, and Uncle Abe took over my business. My father and Uncle Abe handled separate routes, so Uncle Abe took over my business. And I went into the Army. I was in the Army for a little over 3 years. Luckily, more than a year and a half was spent in Paris. The moment we took Paris, I was put into Paris, and I was left there until I went home. I could not have asked for a better assignment.
Oh, they knew the right person.
Yeah.
The produce place, and it was called The Level, right?
No, that was the Merchants Association, and where they bought their produce, all the produce dealers got together and formed the Level.
Oh,
And that's where Morris worked, and
Harry
Harry.
worked there too.
Yeah, right.
Talk about
Not too
nepotism.
long.
Why was it called the level?
What?
And David of Siddell worked there, and Miriam, I think, too, and she arranged for them to meet, Dave and Siddell, at the Level.
Why was it called the level?
I don't remember. Do you know
What?
why it was called the Level?
They
It was
were
an
all even
association.
partners.
It was an association of
Wait,
other,
Wait, one at a time.
of all,
One at
of
a
all
time.
people in the food produce business.
They were all on the same level.
They were all on the same level.
Maybe that was the same thing.
It was
Okay,
in
so now-
Washington, it was in Washington Market, which was on Washington Street.
In Manhattan, Lower Manhattan. I think they've since moved to the Bronx. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue with your work and then into
All right, when I
retirement.
came back from the Army, I did not want to go back in the business. I think my father was heartbroken because I had done so well in the business, and he couldn't understand why I didn't want to go back in it. Why I was going to study both accounting and law, which he felt was beneath what I was doing. Because I was making out very well in business, and here I was going to make very little in accounting and law. However, I had a different viewpoint, I felt. And it was at that time that I got married to Yetta, and I started working for a firm called Schmulka Bernstein for a while. And Yetta said to me, "But you studied to be an accountant. You want to be CP?" So she prodded me to leave my job, to go to work for an accountant, take less money, and get my, what they call the 3 years of experience. She backed me up on this, and I went through that. And then after I finished the 3 years of experience, then I could accept any kind of job. And at that point, things went very well.
And what about your law degree? When did you get that?
I got my law degree in 1952, which was, we were still in Empire Boulevard. We had not moved out on the island yet.
Okay, now from there you go into retirement. And could you tell us some of the things that
Well,
you do in
a
retirement?
good portion of my time is spent, is done in music. I play the piano, and I am now learning how to play the violin. And I have been very lucky to get one of the top teachers in the country. She has the worst student, but that's her trouble.
Well, now let's back up. Wait, let's back up in your musical experience. You've done other things musically besides the piano and the violin. So would you tell us about some of the classes you've taken and some of the
Well,
tap dancing?
I've attended courses on harmony, counterpoint, and so forth, While in Massapequa Park.
Yeah.
My teacher, who, by the way, our piano teacher, was also one of the top teachers at that time, but he just taught the piano. He didn't teach anything about music itself. I had to fill that in afterward in these courses.
And what about your tap dancing?
I have my tap dancing shoes waiting. I have them with me, yes.
Oh, we didn't know
That'll be at 2 o'clock.
He didn't tell you about teaching piano, and he taught Saul and Jack.
Right.
They were his, and you too.
And
Oh,
my
I
brother
remember
too,
that.
Yes,
absolutely.
And Irving too.
He was a wonderful teacher. The only ones that
Miranda's
didn't
looking for a teacher.
recognize his talent was his, I don't know if it was elementary school or high school. I remember my mother telling us that every time Tante Becky goes to school, they say to her, Ben tries so hard. So I don't know what the grades were like, but Ben tries so hard.
I did very poorly. I did just enough to get through the class. I was what you might call a C student, all the way
Be
through,
president.
all through high school. College was different. College was done while in business. It was always done while
At night.
At night.
He went all through it.
Probably over a period of about 12 years.
You
But
showed them.
there I improved a little bit.
And what about law school?
Yeah, law school, you had to drop out because somebody caused you to drop out for a semester, right?
I
Some
dropped
child
out?
or something?
Where is he? Is he here?
Okay.
I dropped out.
One at a
I think I was only out for one semester or 2 semesters. Well, when somebody
1
was
year.
born, yes. Yes. But at that time, I think I still took a course at City College during that time too. Because that was just one course.
And who is that somebody?
Okay, Rose, let's move on to
Just wanted to know the
Rose.
name.
Speaking of his education, when he finished college at night, I figured he'd be so tired of going to school, so he approaches me if I want to go to law school with him, and he'll pay my tuition. Well, he did for the 1 year, and then he dropped out to have his child. And I never got it back again until he paid for my closings of my house. Such. Anyway.
She was ready to sue me.
I went to college. I majored in math, and I worked for a consulting actuary. And that's where I was at the point I got married to Julie, and I left to have my firstborn, and stayed out for about 11 years, and through Ronnie, until Ronnie carried her tray in first grade. Then I went back and became a teacher. I took education. I never wanted to take education courses in college. I thought it was amby-pamby kind of stuff. And then that's what I was fated to do. And I became a teacher in my own district, 4th grade, same as Arcadia is now.
And I was one of your students.
And when I subbed, yes, I used to sub for 2.5 years before I took on. And the Newport State Teachers College, it was by share that I teach. They came down to Farmingdale where I lived and set up summer programs for 4 years so I can take my master's in education, which was on top of the law degree that I got at that time. And I taught for 23.5 years, and then I retired, and then I was sort of a caregiver for Julie, but we still managed to do a lot of things until he couldn't. And then we moved to Maryland, where he was for about 2.5 years, and that's where I live now for the last 11 years. And I'm involved in a lot of things. I volunteer at a recording studio, which is a continuation of my education program, by recording textbooks for visually impaired, dyslexic and blind and dyslexic. And we take from elementary all the way up to postgraduate, people that are getting their college, their doctorates even, rely on these, now they're CDs. We started out with tapes that they had to do, and that was more cumbersome to find the place on the tape. The CDs, you can find the numbers more accurately for the chapters of the books that they need. So it's very satisfying, and I do that once a week. I play bridge and read, and some traveling, and now I spend my winters in Florida.
And she belongs to, what, 1,000 book clubs?
Yeah.
And a poetry club, and the museum goers, and
Right,
the
we have
theater
a Friday
subscription.
museum group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're docent
Oh, I'm been a docent at Show House in Washington this year for the National Symphony Orchestra Women's Committee. I'm doing it.
And she plays Scrabble on the internet.
And I have a Scrabble set with me if you're interested.
Great.
And I think I speak for the family when I say that we are really so proud of you three people, and of course Charlotte and the children and everything. You have really made a real contribution to our world and to our family, and you're special.
I thank you. What I'm most proud of is starting this group back in
That's-
'91,
okay,
our
Rose,
first time.
Let's start with you. What does these reunions mean to you? That's the,
We started out just as a way of getting out of doing the work at home when you have all the kids over and feeding and the linens and all that. And I told you this many times, I asked Saul and Jack, would they like to go up to the country? And Joel had told us about the Mountain Laurel. And we started out with 10 rooms. And we had such a good time together, just with our own children. At that time, it was our children. Then we didn't even, did we have the grandchildren yet then? Yeah, I guess some, yeah, we did have, they were very little.
Well, we used to do reunions. We did
Oh,
some
we
in
had
Catskills and the Granite.
Yeah, we
and
had those kind of reunions, but then we didn't do it for a long time. And we started again, just as I say, the premise wasn't the way it is now, but then when I saw all the grandchildren together and enjoying each other's company, and Jane, is she there? Wrote that letter to everyone telling them how wonderful that first one was. We had an onslaught the next year, as you can see by the pictures in the album, if you notice. We started in '91, and you have all the people that we've missed that are gone now that are in there, and that's what's so precious. Each year, we've lost a few over the years, and everyone, you seem to have a feeling too, to want to come.
Ben, what does it mean to you? What can you add anything to what Rose said?
Well, we used to meet at one time, family used to come together at different houses. Monthly, Uncle Abe insisted upon it. And of course, as we moved apart further, I think this was a wonderful way of getting back together again.
And you had one in Chicago. They had a similar type of thing,
Right.
but it kind of petered out.
In
Yeah.
Florida, they used to get together too.
I remember going over Beatty's house, Beatty Seymour's house for a family reunion. And what sticks in my mind the most about that time is that you served a turkey. And when you went to take the turkey, you peeled the skin back and it was all pre-cut. I was amazed that I never saw that again anywhere.
Oh, if you have it catered, you can see it.
Yeah, you know, I never
She
saw
never
that.
catered anything.
Yeah, New York
She cooked
City.
everything.
Wait a minute. For the sake of the tape, you have to do one at a time, otherwise we're gonna lose it all.
When we first started doing the family circles in our homes, we were just going to do dessert and coffee. Then it was herring and potatoes. And then each one said, gee, I want to do a little more. And it suddenly came up to a full-course Hawaiian dinner. And then we had shulant. And then say, it's too much for the young couples, the newly married, we better go back to dessert and coffee. We started dessert and coffee, and little kept going back to, well, now you see where we are. 2 meals a day, all prepared for.
No, but Maya used to bring,
Oh, that
he
was a Hanukkah party.
He used to bring the
Right.
salami and the corned beef
And the
stuff like that,
The high-grade Frankfurt.
high grade stuff.
And where did we meet?
Democrat
The Democratic Club.
And we used to meet in Jeannie Meyer's basement.
That was the party, that's the party we
Hanukkah
had
party.
when Sylvia was moving to California.
Right.
We had a party in Jeannie's basement on Williams Avenue. Yeah.
We
Sam, you
also
wanna-
went to the Catskills
Yeah,
a number of times.
Right.
And at one time, we had a caravan that went to the old
Old
farmhouse.
Yes.
to
Rebecca
see where
was
they
with us.
lived.
One at a time.
Right.
Yes.
And our children, I believe Marv was with us at that time. Gail wasn't there, she had little ones. And it was wonderful of seeing all the cars going there and seeing what it looked like, which had changed because there were all kinds of clothes hanging on racks there, if I recall. Do you remember that? And we heard that it was
It
the,
was a Jewish group there.
yes, it was
They
the,
must have used it as sort of camp, and
Right.
nobody was there. We walked up on the place. It was
exactly.
completely empty. Books were open. They must have gone elsewhere.
It
But
seems,
they were doing something.
Yeah.
We felt like we were intruders.
I thought it was the Lubavitcher that had moved in there.
But
And the way the
Rebecca-
books were, and the coats, the way they were hanging, what they were wearing. But that was my feeling.
Rebecca and Sam went looking for the old outhouses that they remembered from back then.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Sam, do you want to add anything to what the reunion means to you?
Well, to us, the ones who lived away from New York, you know, we were like outsiders, so coming back to a family reunion, we saw everybody there. I mean, you know, it was a real homecoming. So that was the great thing about that.
California, Chicago, and
Yes.
South Africa now. That's a distinction, really.
From every corner of the world they come.
And even from Florida, we have a lot of,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we have to thank Andrew for the opportunity that he's given us to
Yes.
do this, and then to hopefully in years to come, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren look at this tape or this CD and say, gee, this was really a special group. Thank you so much.
What a program.
So we're being, I want to announce that your family is next year. Wait, next year, at next year's reunion, we
Some of
will
the things you
interview,
filled in that I didn't.
Bee will interview herself.
Rose will do
I
it.
have to tell you, I can tell you right now,
I couldn't expect.
that my
you can't expect
history
you to know
is
we never
so,
fixed it.
But
and
That's
so
okay.
extreme
No, that's
with
fine.
this particular-
That's what's good.
I really don't know that much.
No, you do, you have your own hands. Rose will do an agenda and she will do.
You've got to
You
get
know,
her.
Let's talk more
I don't
questions.
think they can come next year. I really don't think they will just I don't think they'll be able to come. Harold is on our choir and in our synagogue. I don't think they're not gonna come. So we'll have to worry about Sam,
In the one room.
see, we missed that.
She also remembers that Rebecca must have been in that one room.